He was dying when they brought him to St. Francis. Pale. Ragged breath. Eyes half shut, as if he'd already begun to leave. The brothers said he was beyond help. But Francis didn't speak. He knelt beside the man. Placed one hand on his chest. Whispered something no one else heard. And the man inhaled. Deep. Full. Alive. His color returned. His body stopped shaking. The fever, gone. They called it a miracle. The man wept, clutching the rough wool of Francis's sleeve. He said, "I felt light." He said, "I saw the gate." He said, "You pulled me back." Francis did not respond. He only stood. Looked at the man. Then walked away. The man's name was Matteo. He was 30, maybe younger. No family. No possessions. Just a small wooden token he kept tied to his belt, a carved fish. He stayed near the monastery for a while. Helped with stonework. Mended fences. He never spoke much after the healing. Only prayed. And always sat in the last pew of the chapel, not in front, not near the candles, but where the shadows stretched long at dusk. One night, Francis passed him in the cloister. Matteo looked up and said, "It's strange, being saved." Francis paused. Matteo continued, eyes distant. "It feels like I'm supposed to do something. But I don't know what." The pain left. But nothing came in. Francis placed a hand on his shoulder. Then walked on. After a few months, Matteo vanished. No goodbyes. No letter. The brothers assumed he'd returned to the town he came from. The miracle was over. Life moved on. Years passed. Then one morning, while the fog still clung to the hills, Francis found someone standing at the edge of the chapel grounds. It was Matteo. Older now. Thinner. Eyes hollow, as if no light ever reached behind them. Francis approached. Matteo didn't move. Then, without a greeting, he said, "I thought healing meant God had something for me." He stared past Francis, toward the chapel bell. "But it's been silence. I waited for purpose. I fasted. I served. And I felt nothing." Francis said nothing. Because what could he say? Matteo followed Francis into the chapel that morning. He didn't kneel. He just stood near the door, watching the flicker of a single candle at the altar's edge. His voice was low. Measured. Not angry, just hollow. "When I was dying, I saw something. A light, maybe. A space. But it didn't pull me forward. It pushed me back." He rubbed the carved fish at his belt. "I think I wasn't ready. But I wasn't meant to return either." Francis turned toward him. Eyes kind. Face quiet. No fear. Just listening. Matteo said, "You healed my body. But I don't think my soul came with it." Later that day, Matteo walked the monastery grounds alone. One of the younger brothers offered him bread. Matteo took it. Ate in silence. When asked where he had lived all these years, he simply said, "Nowhere. With people, sometimes. With silence, mostly." He slept in the chapel that night. No bed. Just the stone floor. Near the place where he had first been healed. Francis watched him from the shadows of the hallway. And remembered that day, the sudden breath, the weeping, the lightness. And now, this. Not anger. Not sin. Just emptiness. At dawn, Francis found Matteo standing outside the chapel again. This time, barefoot. He said, "I kept waiting for something to return. Joy. Fire. Calling. Anything." He looked down at his hands. "But I think, whatever was meant to grow, never did. I was healed. But I remained hollow." He handed Francis the wooden fish from his belt. Said nothing. Then walked down the hill, alone. And never came back. Francis kept the carved fish. It was rough. Worn smooth at the edges. A small crack near the tail. He placed it in the chapel, not on the altar, not with the relics. But in the last pew. The one where Matteo always sat. Where the shadows gathered at dusk. The brothers asked who it belonged to. Francis said, "Someone who was saved. But never returned." He didn't explain. And they didn't ask again. Some weeks later, a traveler passed through the monastery gates. He had never met Matteo. But as he sat with the brothers over supper, he told a story. Of a man who wandered between towns. Who spoke gently. Helped without asking. And vanished without thanks. A man who never smiled. But always listened. And who, in the middle of one long winter, simply disappeared. Francis listened. When the traveler left, he walked to the chapel. Sat in the last pew. Beside the fish. Said nothing. Then he whispered, "I saw light in you. But maybe, you never did." That night, Francis dreamed of Matteo. Not as he had returned. But as he had been, just after the healing. Eyes clear. Hands steady. But no voice. In the dream, Matteo sat across from him. Staring. Waiting. And when Francis asked, "What are you missing?" Matteo replied, "I don't know what to hold." Then he opened his hands. They were empty. Francis woke with tears on his face. Not of fear. Not of guilt. Of sorrow. The kind that cannot be spoken. Only carried. Francis never spoke of Matteo again. But the carved fish remained. It moved sometimes. From pew to pew. From step to windowsill. No one touched it. The brothers began to avoid it. One claimed it warmed his hand, just slightly. Another said he saw it sway, even with no wind. Francis said nothing. But each evening, before the candles were lit, he stood by the last pew. And looked at it. Once, a novice asked, "Was he lost?" Francis answered, "No." Then paused. But not found either. Years later, when Francis himself was ill, he asked to be moved outside. To see the sky. To breathe before leaving. A brother brought him a few small things, a cloth, a crucifix, and the carved fish. Francis held it gently in his palm. Said, "Some of us are healed. Just enough to keep wandering." He closed his eyes. And for a moment, he could almost see Matteo again. Walking. Not forward. Not back. Just, Still moving.